right. Well, it is 9 o'clock, and welcome to this Tuesday morning Stormwater Awareness Workshop. And we have Chris Brown, a good friend and colleague of mine. He's with ETIC, and he's going to be talking about, well, probably a subject that you want to hear about, the construction general permit, the new construction general permit. And there's a lot of nuances and new things to that. So, Chris, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit, tell folks about yourself, and then let's jump into it.
Okay, sounds good. Good morning, everybody. So I'm Chris Brown, and I'm a CASQA approved trainer of record, and I, teach QSD classes as often as I can. I work at ETIC Engineering, and we provide a variety of environmental, construction, civil services, and of course stormwater services. I spend most of my time writing SWEPs, but as I'm sure some of you know, the role of the QSD has changed, and so now I also spend a considerable amount of time conducting inspections and working as part of a stormwater team on each project that I'm assigned to. So there's my contact information. If you ever want to get a hold of me, feel free. And I think we'll just go ahead and jump right in. So it's going to be pretty fast paced, and we'll try to take some questions at the end. John might be able to field some questions, and I'll leave a couple of minutes for everyone to get ready for their next workshop. So I'll just go as far as I can. We don't need to get through all these slides. We'll cover as much as possible. So, okay, here we go. The permit is divided into two main sections plus the attachments. The order is essentially the rules. There's lots of requirements that are straight out of the order. I reference those, reference the order all the time. For traditional projects, all the requirements are in attachment D, and for linear overhead underground utility projects, the requirements are in attachment E. This permit has been simplified. They added a lot of new topics, but it has been simplified in its design, its layout in comparison to the '09 permit, where each of the risk levels was broken up into a different attachment. It wasn't that complicated. They were building blocks, but this is where you can find the nitty gritty for your traditional risk level projects, your traditional construction, home building, road construction, commercial construction, and for the communications, the internet, the phone company, gas company, water company, utilities, they fall into this category. There are still these six types, risk level 1, 2, 3, and LUP type 1, 2, and 3. And then there's a variety of attachments in the permits. We won't have enough time to go into each and every one of these. One that we will talk about, just because it keeps coming up over and over, is this TMD applicability. And then this one, I'll stop right here. Right here, we won't get to this. So here it is. Attachment J, the dewatering requirements. Those two, there's always like main things to remember about each of these topics, right? The main thing to remember is that the dewatering requirements in our permit are always going to be option two. Option two, try to remember that. Our permit states that you cannot use this permit if there is a pre-existing dewatering permit, Regional Water Quality Control Board dewatering permit. So you would need, the discharger would need to acquire that permit first. In the instance that that doesn't exist in the world, in that regional board, then this permit could be utilized for dewatering operations, but they would have to comply with all of the requirements in attachment J. And we're talking about, pre-notification to the Regional Water Quality Control Board. These discharges are subject to the NALs for pH and turbidity. That's just to name a few. There's a whole list of requirements that would go along with utilizing this permit for any sort of dewatering operation. So just be very careful. Dewatering is absolutely not allowed. If it is a permitted activity, either under that pre-existing regional dewatering permit or a permitted activity under this permit, and we would have to comply with this. I know that was a lot, but it's an important thing. It doesn't get talked about very much. BMP implementation is required year-round. The state of California for a long time has said that it could rain anytime during the year, and it does. It does. There's thunderstorms and all that. There's definitely that, but where I live, there's some seasons, so you can't count on 100%. But the truth of the matter is BMPs are implemented year round, and we'll go into the BMP requirements later, but this permit regulates both stormwater and non-stormwater discharges. There's authorized and unauthorized. Authorized, there's a specific list of those that I'll show later. Unauthorized is basically any other discharge that is not on that list. For unauthorized non-stormwater discharges, we've had a year to deal with this permit, so like I have learned more than I knew, in the past, right? I have experienced more, and some of the things that I saw but didn't really, focus in on previously, are sticking out, And so one of the things that I noticed right in the order, very clearly, it states if you have an unauthorized non-stormwater discharge, you're supposed to contact the Regional Water Quality Control Board within 24 hours. I didn't manipulate that or revise it. That's literally what it says. So that's a pretty big deal because these are pretty common in my experience, and our goal is to prevent these. But this is something that we have to deal with and take on. And so, like I said, there is it doesn't explain the in great detail or anything like that, or when it applies or all that. It just simply says if you have an unauthorized stormwater discharge, contact the Regional Water Quality Control Board in 2 hours. Within 24 hours, and then that's it, done. So the trigger for permit coverage is unchanged. We're still looking at 1 acre or greater. It could be less than an acre if your project is a part of a, sorry, I need to turn something off. If your project is part of a larger common plan of development, so say, Jack is developing 10 acres, he sells off 0.75 acres to Sarah. She and her team, it's a different entity. They don't think that they need permit coverage because they're less than an acre, but her project is part of a larger comp plan of development. Once they sold it, she can't actually run her project under his SWEP. She needs her own SWEP, her own permit, her own stormwater program, and that's how that works. So it's a little bit complicated, but it is a thing that people should be aware of. So filing for permit coverage is not too different these days. We've got our permit registration documents. We're filling out an NO application and uploading a SWEP and maps and risk calculations. There's some changes to the post-con standards, and there is, of course, the requirement to obtain permit coverage prior to commencing construction activity. You shouldn't move in or stage or mobilize in any way, shape, or form without having acquired permit coverage first. Staging is construction, right? Staging is disturbance. And so you got to be careful with that. So there is a new public posting notice. You'll see this about 5 times, so you won't forget this. But there is a public posting notice. The WDID needs to be viewable by the public. Failure to get permit coverage is a violation of the Clean Water Act. Again, a lot of these statements are right out of the permit. So LUPs, they can get standalone coverage if they have a single project, like a pipeline project. It can go standalone, but many LUPs have lots of projects. And so there is a new programmatic option where the discharger gets one common SWEP, one regional SWEP per the regional board that they're in. So let's just pretend they're in region 5F for Fresno. And so they have this regional SWEP that actually has the rules for type 1, type 2, and type 3, and it has all the rules that would apply. And then for each project in that regional board, the discharger prepares an LCAN, a linear construction activity notification. So you can call this a mini SWEP if you want, but really the SWEP would be both the common SWEP and the LCAN that has the site-specific information. Those two documents would be the SWEP for that project, that LCAN. Each LCAN requires an annual report be submitted. And at the end, once the LCAN has completed, not the regional SWEP, not all the projects, but just that LCAN, a linear construction termination notification is filed. This is essentially a new name for an NOT for an LCAN. Okay, and so next. So we are in sorry, I'm getting distracted by a chat box. Sorry. So we're in the transitional period. It started on 9/1/23 and it ends, it's a 2-year period and it ends on 8/31/25. So what's happening? Well, the projects that were permitted under '09, if they haven't, finished out, they're still rolling under the '09 requirements. And for projects that, permitted and mobilized after 9/1, they're under the new permit that we've been implementing this last year. And so we have both permits live. And what's going to happen is if they don't finish their project, they're going to get their '09 project, they're going to get administratively terminated on 9/1/25, and they need to get permit coverage under the new permit. They should do that before it expires, of course. If a '09 project needs to increase acreage, like they get an extra staging area or significant project creep occurs and their disturbed acreage has grown, they will need to get coverage under the 2022 CGP. And so this is an interesting topic that has developed over the last year. So inactivity. So pay real close attention to this one because it has such positive benefits. So if a project is going to be inactive for 30 days or longer and it's completely inactive, even treatment operations, there is no construction activity going on whatsoever. The project winterizes itself, well, not itself, but it gets winterized with a full suite of sediment erosion controls. Remember, it's inactive, so it requires total erosion control. Inactive areas, right? You need erosion control, site stabilization. So you winterize the site, you take photographs, you make a map key in a photo log, and you're going to submit an inactivity COI. And once that is approved, only once it's approved, several things are going to happen. Sampling will be suspended. So for these risk level and LUP type 2 and 3 projects, sampling is going to be suspended and inspections will be reduced to once a month and pre-QPE inspections. So those are big benefits, a lot of cost savings there. And so you could see how this would be very beneficial for a project that is complete but needs to grow grass on this area. And that can take 6 months or 9 months or whatever. And so they could have this reduced inspection frequency during the final stabilization phase. They would hydroseed it and, let nature take its course, keep doing the monthly and pre-QP inspections, and then wait for that. Another example would be like a project wants to, not apply BMPs over and over and over and fight the rainy season. So they go inactive for, 4 or 5 months during the rainy season, and then they reactivate later on. Now, in order to resume construction, this is the little tricky part. They actually have to file another COI, a request to resume COI needs to be filed, and it has to be approved before they can start doing any construction activity. So there is that one little hurdle. Now, once the initial inactivity COI is filed, this will trigger a QSD inspection within 14 days of that COI approval. So I hope that made sense and is helpful. It's really starting to come into play now that we're, at a year mark now, and some projects are completing and they're moving into that final stabilization phase. I haven't used it for a temporary halt in construction, 30 or 60, 90 days. But I think about 3 times just recently we're looking at filing inactivity for projects that have been hydroseeded and they're in that phase. So the roles, not too much has changed with the roles, but one name changed, but this used to be approved signatory. Now it's duly authorized. Under '09, it was approved signatory, so they changed the name. But there is specific requirements in the permit for each of these roles, and the big change would be for QSDs, some significant changes for QSPs, and delegation has been reduced, and then formal training for QSP delegates. So let's dive into this. So the discharger, the entity, it could be a home builder, it could be an organization, a commercial company, it could be a person. The discharger is just the project proponent really, but they're responsible for making sure that amendments are uploaded, SWEP amendments are uploaded within 30 days, and that everyone that works for them has appropriate licenses and certifications, and that the dates are correct. This is very important for risk determination, what's listed on smarts, and of course on that public posting notice. The LRP, the legally responsible person, is the primary signatory for the discharger. It's as simple as that. They review, certify, and submit the required documentation on the SMARTS websites. They can assign someone to be their duly authorized representative, which would then be able to perform the review, certification, and submittal of documents on the behalf of the LRP. These people work for the same company. This is not a service that is provided by a consultant. So the QSD, their role has really changed, and I would just simply say inspections. lots of inspections. It depends on how many projects you're the QSD on. If you're just a project on just one or two, then there's a handful of inspections. If you're the QSD on dozens of projects, well, there's going to be quite a few inspections. And so there's 30-day commencement, there's annual, there's now exceedance, COI, and activity. I have a chart for that to show you all the different inspections that a QSD may need to do. Okay. And of course, as the SWEP is a living document, so as conditions change, the SWEP may need to be revised. Different BMPs, maybe the project expanded, we need to acreage increase, maybe the duration has extended, we need an R factor extension, which will affect the risk determination. But um, the main thing is to remember that the QSDs are also QSPs, so they could serve in both roles if needed. And the delegates, trained delegates, their information is required to be in the SWEP. Let's proceed. Here's the inspections for QSDs. So just yesterday, I did a 30-day commencement inspection. I've got a checklist that I'm using to make sure that the minimum requirements are being fulfilled. The checklist is actually inadequate. I went through all of the permit requirements, and I have a separate list of things that I check that is kind of like a additional items. But what am I looking for? I mean, just in a nutshell, where's your smoke kit? Where's your stockpile of BMPs? Your erosion control stockpile? Leak trace for toilets. Where's the WDID posting notice? Has the delegate received their foundational and site-specific training? Was the training log provided? Was it uploaded to Smarts prior to them performing any of the duties? These are all permit requirements. So like I said, there's a long list of things that I'm looking at. So that's just those some examples. So if the QSD is replaced, 2 annual inspections in these chunks of time right here during the year, within 14 calendar days of anal exceedance, within 14 days of that inactivity COI, additional inspections if requested by the regional board, and again, QSDs are QSPs. I don't want to offend anybody, but sometimes people ask me, some people think that these are two different things. A QSD certification is a QSD/QSP certification. All QSDs are also QSPs. It's not two separate classes. They're overlapping classes. This class is 1 day longer for QSDs. So just want to make sure that everyone understands that. Okay, so the QSP role has, as I said, there's been some more involvement is now required from the QSPs. They were able to delegate a lot of their tasks under the O9 permit. You can still do delegation, but now QSPs are required to conduct monthly inspections. And this is one of the biggest changes in the permit right here. All pre-QPE inspections are performed by a QSP, okay? By the QSP, a QSP. And so they can no longer delegate that inspection. So they will have an increased inspection frequency. Now some QSPs were doing everything anyways and didn't even have delegates, but some were really expansive on delegation. And, as long as people were appropriately trained, that was fine. But now things have changed a little bit and they're required to do certain inspections. So they also need to do inspection within 14 days of anal exceedance, just like the QSD. And then prior to the submittal of the NOT or the linear construction termination notification, or for any acreage change, COI, they need to conduct an inspection. This NOT thing is going to involve the preparation of a QSP final inspection report, separately a photo log and map key. These are just required components of a termination package. The QSP is there to verify that BMPs are being implemented, inspected, installed, maintained. We still have the same 72-hour rule. Begin implementation of corrective actions within 72 hours of identification and complete as soon as possible. Very familiar. And then here's the new part. And prior to a forecasted precipitation event. So now they've laid it out that the corrective actions must be completed also before the next rain event. So very important to remember that because everyone's so stuck on the 72-hour thing. Remember, 72 hours is that's a minimalist approach. You could be much more proactive and get things done today, right? And you can sweep the streets today. You can fix that fire rule today, that kind of thing. But now, if there's rain predicted, you throw out the 72 hours and you get things done before it rains. You get it done as quickly as possible to prepare the site for rain. Track out must be controlled. They'll mention this multiple times. There's the posting notice requirement again. Sampling is performed by for stormwater properly for stormwater and non-stormwater discharges, and if delegated by the QSP, the person is properly trained. They're taking representative samples that represent the discharge from active areas of construction, and at a traditional, you got to collect a sample from each discharge location. But at LUPs, you have to select it's linear, it's 10 miles long. So you have to collect samples from the active areas construction. So you would want to, take representative samples in an active area construction. The contact information needs to be updated on smarts within 90 days. And then this new rule. So photos are now required for all projects. Photos were required for LUPs under the 2009 permit. It was that whole take photographs before, during, and after rain events, and then submit them every 3 quote rain events. Remember that, some of you? And but traditional didn't have that requirement. Well, now all projects have a photograph requirement, and this is word for word. Got to photograph problem areas of erosion, sedimentation, unauthorized non-stormwater discharges, failed BMPs. Okay, these photos are provided to the regulators upon request. You can have your SWEP and your inspections in electronic format. Let me make this real clear. It needs to be on site and be available upon request. It's not something that you need 2 hours to go get, right? So if you either have your documents on site hard copy or you have them in electronic format, but in both formats, they're available on request. People seem to be having a problem with this last year. So what it clearly also states is that a hard copy map is required on site. So you should have a map. Remember, the map is a BMP tracking tool. It's something that gets marked up literally on every inspection as needed. If additional BMPs are installed or if something gets moved, you cross it off, you draw its new location, you date and initial. This map markup thing, not a lot of people realize this or know that, but that's the point of it. It's a tracking tool to reflect. It should match what BMPs are installed out in the field. Okay. All right. So let's slow down a little bit here because this is going to be very important to many of you, the delegate. Okay. So the discharger can authorize a QSP to delegate, their tasks, right? And QSPs often delegate have to provide training based on, this is crucial, based on the guidelines from the CGP training team. Okay. Well, these guidelines did not exist last year. So projects went live under the new permit, and these guidelines, they didn't come out until February of 2024. And these guidelines are rather extensive. Like the training that is required is rather extensive. And I'll just tell you, it's, there's 2 pages of topics for the foundational training and 2.5 pages of topics that need to be covered for the site-specific training. I made a foundational training. It's a 40-page slide deck. It is a substantial training. It's not something that you just like review and instantly understand the topics. It is a slide deck that requires explanation of the topics by someone that is capable of doing that. So it's fairly significant. I just want to warn people about that. Excuse me. So the foundational training is covering these rules. It's a one-time training that covers these topics that are applicable to all projects. Okay, roles, responsibility, forecasting, documentation, reporting procedures. Okay. The site-specific training covers these topic inspection, sampling procedures, SWEP, and BMP implementation. This is required at each site. So they'll get the training over and over again from a QSP at whatever site they are assigned, the delegate assigned to. Now, every project's different. It's going to have different BMPs, different pollutants, different size, different sampling locations. Every project is different in a variety of ways, and that's what the site-specific training is about. So as I said here, these guidelines came out in February 2024. So these are the updated slides that I've added in, okay? And remember, it is a requirement to utilize these guidelines. It says that in the permit. And then in the document, it says that, okay? Right there, use this guideline. So you should obtain these guidelines. You can download it from CASPO's website. It's under the training resource section, okay? And QSPs would need these guidelines to train their delegates. That's all I'm saying, okay? But like I said, what am I so worked up about is it's fairly substantial. Here's how substantial it is. It is a 2-hour training, classroom training. It is a 2.5-hour field training. These are the recommended timelines. Okay. The slide deck that I made for the foundational training is approximately 2 hours long. And the site-specific training, that's going to differ depending on the amount of experience. Remember, some of these delegates are QSPs themselves. People are working in teams and stuff like that. So, maybe they, you still need to do the training. Don't get me wrong, 100%. But, maybe they already know how to collect samples. Maybe they know the rules. So then it's just verifying. So it does say in the document that QSPs are responsible for the work performed by their delegates. So the QSP is responsible, and they can take action against QSPs that don't, properly train or oversee their delegates' work. Okay, that is a requirement of the QSP now. Okay. QSPs must now review the work of trained delegates for all tasks that they assign to them. Okay. Okay, so for foundational training, if the delegate previously took it, like they took it in August of, or of 2024, but it's now 2025, it's up to the QSP to verify that it was completed, like where's the proof that you did the foundational training? And then you need to go through them and, ask them, how, verify that they understand the content of the foundational training. So that guidelines that I mentioned that you can download would be helpful for that. And then just so it's clear, it does state that it is the site-specific training is required to be conducted in the field. That is a permit requirement. Okay. So here is again the breakdown of the foundational and site-specific training and what is discussed. Remember, this is not the outline. The outline is like an 8-page long document that again has 2 pages of line after line of topics that need to be discussed for foundational and 2.5 pages of this. So uh, you know so this is the part where it talks about their experience, may come into that, but the main thing is making sure that they are properly trained before they take on that task. It is up to the QSP to determine that the delegates are competent prior to them performing any duties. So you can quiz them, you can ask them questions, you can conduct periodic reviews. There should be some sort of QA/QC to make sure that everyone understands what the permit requires at that specific project. Separate from that, or next, the delegates need to complete a training log that must be uploaded to SMARTS prior to them performing any duties. This is a permit requirement. That log must be completed and uploaded to SMARTS. So if you complete it today, you're not the delegate today. You're the delegate tomorrow after it. So do not start doing delegate activities before it is uploaded to SMARTS. And it's just a permit requirement. Okay. And of course, delegates cannot perform some of the QSD and QSP only required inspections, and I have a chart that shows all the inspections. So the reissuance review, some people maybe have not taken this yet, right? But this is the state training on the new permit. And if you're an existing QSD, QSP under the CASCO system, you need to do this, prior to your certification expiring as part of the renewal process. It's optional. You can take it right now. You can jump in and take it. You don't need to wait. You shouldn't be the QSP at 2022 permitted projects if you haven't taken the reissuance review. So, I mean, that's just my opinion. I'm not sure that that's a requirement, but I feel pretty strongly about that. So, there's 5 modules, 5 quizzes. These quizzes are fairly serious quizzes, so you really need to be paying attention when you watch these modules, or you're going to have a difficult time on these quizzes. So for those self-certified folks, they needed to take the risk reissuance by 9/1/2024. So I hope that you were able to accomplish that. I don't really know. I mean, I would assume that if you didn't, then you may not currently be a QSD. I don't know. That wouldn't surprise me if that was the scenario. So get yourself straightened out on that if you are a self-certified QSD. So the annual requirement is the new annual requirement. So a lot of us are familiar with the ongoing professional development units for underlying certifications, licenses, and that's why a lot of you are participating in these Stormwater Awareness Week, right? But now the state in the permit has made it a requirement that a minimum of 6 hours of continuing education, not a minimum, 6 hours of continuing education must be completed on an annual basis. And I usually look things up every time I have a little hiccup in my thought process, but I'm pretty sure it actually says that the training must be stormwater topics, where some of the underlying certifications, they may give you credit for going to like an air quality workshop or something like that. But I believe the CGP, I think I got this right out of the permit. So you just need to be careful with that. The hours, of course, the 6 hours can be utilized to satisfy your underlying certification. Some require more than 6 hours, so you don't need to refer to that. Of course, we still have the 2-year renewal period on the offset water programs for QSDs and QSPs. And again, the self-certifying folks, they have to you do not have to complete this continuing education. They do whatever is required to keep their license that they used to become a QSD in good standing. We discussed this last year. There is the chance for a suspension or recension, revoke, if someone's not adequately trained or somebody does something fraudulent, makes false statements. So this, I like to call these, I'm getting new terminology, so I believe it or not, I need to speed up. I want to speed up. So here we go. So these are the weekly site inspections, okay? And sorry, I'll slow down. These are the site inspections. That's what I'm calling them. Okay. There's so many inspections, calling these the site inspections. So they simplified the permit and they made it very similar. Traditional and LUP used to have wildly different inspection frequencies. Well, now it looks almost identical, except for LUP type 1 does not require post QP inspections. Great. So there's the inspection frequency for your site. But as I said, there's a big chart that has all the inspections. If you are doing a pre, during, or post inspection, that would satisfy the weekly. I mean, the 30-day inspection, the 30-day QSD project commencement inspection that I did yesterday, it also satisfied the weekly. It also satisfied the annual inspection. So there is a lot of overlap. Inspections absolutely need to be, and sampling need to be conducted during normal site business hours. That's a safety consideration. Okay. We're not collecting samples at night or on the weekends if they're closed, whatever, just outside of business hours, we're not required to do these things. So business hours are to be defined and they should be on the SWEP cover. It's a requirement now. I think it goes on the title page or something like that, but it's in the permit. It says that. So what is a QPE? If you haven't figured this out. This new term, remember it was QRE, qualifying rain event. Well, now we're using QPE. Very simply, it is a 50% chance of a half inch of rain in a 24-hour period. 50% probability of precipitation and a quantitative predictive forecast of a half inch in a 24-hour period. So 50% half inch, that's all we need to remember. Here's the pre-inspection done 72 hours in advance, up to 120 hours if there's forecast available for that. So they can really get out there early, give the site more time to prepare. And then if an extended storm occurs, the extended inspections are based on a quarter of an inch predicted every 24-hour period that there's a quarter of an inch predicted, then you have to keep doing extended inspections. If you actually end up having and it ends the first day that there's not a quarter of an inch, okay, it's over right then. And if you end up having a half inch of rainfall, then you need to conduct a post QPE within 96 hours. Rain gauges are now required and they will be used to determine if a post QPE inspection is required. Okay, so this is right out of the permit. So let's look at this just really briefly. Some of you have probably seen these from the state's workshop, so I'll just go over this, but we're just spend a minute on it so people understand. So you're like checking the weather every day and you're looking for 50% or greater. And so you see, you're out here and it's, after Christmas, you're checking the weather every day and then you see 50% or greater. Well, all you need to do is count these 4 6-hour periods down here. And if that amount is more than half an inch, this is greater than 50%, right? You wouldn't even be looking, right? And half an inch, then you've got a QPE. And you need to do a pre-QP inspection. You need to do a during inspection. Why does it start and end? Because there is no quarter inch of rain predicted in the next 24-hour period. We're checking out the rain every day, checking it out. Oh, there's that 50%. And we look down at our 4 quarters. Notice that it's over a 2-day period. I have a lot of questions about this, but that's fine. But it doesn't matter. I'm 100% sure. 24 hours. I look at these 4 quarters. It does not add to half an inch. There's no QPE. Checking the rain every day, cruising along, seeing up. There's 60% greater than 50%. I'm going to count my 4 quarters up and I'm greater than half an inch. I got a QPE. I know I'm going to need to do a pre-QPE. And then I'm looking forward and I see the next 24-hour period has greater than a quarter of an inch. So I know I need to do an extended storm inspection. This period does not have a quarter of an inch, so the storm event is over. And if it ends up raining half an inch, then I need to do a post QPE within 96 hours. You can see that with these long times, 72 hours, 120, 96, that the post could end up being the pre, of a coming storm. So there, as I said, there can be some overlap, some rather serious overlap. This is a multi-day rain event inspection, so it's actually a simpler version. I mean, if you just look at it, you're checking the weather every day. You see, oh, greater than 50%. You count it up. You got a half inch or more. You know you're going to do a pre-QPE, and then from that point on, and I should have said this on this slide back here, but literally from that point on after the first day, you never look at the probability of precipitation. That means nothing. You simply look at whether or not a quarter of an inch is predicted. And as you can see that every one of these 24-hour periods is more than a quarter inch. So this is a extended, inspection day after day, every 24 hours, doing inspections, collecting samples. And then finally, the last day of inspection is here. And there's no rain here, and so it's over. Okay, so I know that was a lot, but look at this slide. This is a great slide because it has all the inspections in one. So there's the site inspections that I was talking about, and there is uh uh, it, the biggest thing, I'll just point this out, is that notice there's no box there, right? No check in that box, I should say. So pre-QPE inspections done by the QSP or a QSD. And then there's the QSP monthly, their NOT inspections, COI, now exceedance inspections, the QSD inspections we talked about, 30 days, annuals, now exceedances, approved COIs right down here. But look at this inactive thing right down here. When we file for that inactivity and it gets approved, it triggers that QSD inspection within 14 days, and we can move to this inactive inspection frequency. Remember, sampling is suspended. We move to this monthly and pre-QPE, but look over here. The delegate can perform these inspections, even the pre-QPE. I double checked this in the permit, okay? And so it's definitely there. So that's nice. And so for this long stabilization of that hydroseed, the delegate can remember the QSP is still reviewing their work. Delegates still have to report corrective actions back to the QSP within 24 hours. They have a system to do that. And so here's the monitoring exemptions, the safety exemptions, but basically any dangerous conditions, high wind, outside of scheduled hours, night on the weekends if they're not, there. And then of course, if it's not accessible, maybe there's like 3 feet of snow or something like that. So I always just tell people you have to make your own, safety judgment calls. There's the minimum, but then, you make your own, safety calls, so if any inspection or sampling is not conducted, then it needs to be documented. Okay. And so just keep that in mind that every time, so like literally, I didn't conduct during rain events on Monday. I didn't conduct during storm inspections on Saturday and Sunday, or collect samples at my risk level 2 or 3 project on Saturday and Sunday, because those storms, those rain event days and the discharges, if there was one, occurred outside of business hours. So you have to keep track and write down why you didn't. What was outside of business hours? I couldn't get to the site because of this, 3 feet of snow. Whatever, everyone, figure that part out for themselves, but you get the gist. So the sampling. Okay, really quickly, here we go. So effluent sampling still applies to risk level and LUP type 2 and 3. So this is pH and turbidity analysis during storm events, discharges during normal site business hours, right? Analyzing it and comparing it to the NALs for pH and turbidity. And we'll go into this in greater detail in a second. Receiving water monitoring, just the 3s with direct discharges. Receiving water sampling is required if the receiving water monitoring triggers are exceeded. Non-visual pollutant sampling, this applies to all projects. There have been a significant change in each one of these categories. Mostly it just has to do with timing and reporting and stuff like that. But one really big change is the way that we look at our samples and compare them to the NALs. So here's the NALs for pH 6.5 to 8.5 and turbidity. You collect a sample and the water needs to be between 6.5 and 8.5 or below 250. If it's not, you've had a NAL exceedance. You then implement corrective actions. This is just a big fancy table saying that. So now provide performance on the BMPs that are installed, and we're installing them to protect the receiving water beneficial uses. This came from the permit. So take action, corrective action when exceedance occurs is an iterative process, and we need to continue to make corrective action until we're no longer having an exceedance. Okay. Failure to implement corrective action is a violation of the construction general permit. That's not just true for exceedances. That's true for anything, street sweeping, fix that fiber roll, clean up that spill. Failure to do these things, regardless of rain events, is, failure to implement corrective action or failure to implement the SWEP. These are terms, that you don't want to have mentioned at your projects. So the numeric action levels, the nows, apply in our permit in several different ways, but affluent sampling is the one that we're most familiar with, pH and turbidity sampling, right? But they also do apply to non-stormwater discharges. There's debate about this, but it is clearly stated in several locations, enough so that I can't say it's not. So I believe that non-stormwater discharges are subject to the nows. It says so. So it's very, tricky on that. And then this whole TMDL related thing, dewatering, we'll talk about the team business and I mentioned the dewatering. So this is a crucial slide. The biggest thing is this red text. So under 2009, traditional projects had to collect a sample from all discharge locations. Those samples were averaged together to get a storm event daily average of all samples taken, and they were then compared to the NALs for pH turbidity to see if you had an exceedance or not. That is gone. There is no longer any averaging, period. People will just simply take a scoop from each discharge location and compare it to the NALs. So your good and bad samples are not going to average them together. Your 20 and your NTUs and your 280 NTUs are not going to average to 150. There is no, you would have two numbers, a 20 and a 280, and you've had a NAL exceedance at the one that is 280, so they can't be undone. You implement additional BMPs. You don't take more samples because there's no averaging. Your new sample doesn't replace your original sample. Once a NAL exceedance occurs, it cannot be undone. All NAL exceedances are reportable to the state of California via an ad hoc report on the SMART system by the LRP or their DAR or approved signatory. So LUPs, they need to take one or more sample from representative discharge locations, basically in active areas of construction. So they're linear, but they need to take samples at representative locations. If the storm event extends, then samples are collected from those same locations every 24 hours. And like I said, there's no averaging. And if you have stored or contained water, like in a basin or something like that, that water would be sampled when it's discharged. A lot of basins are set up to treat water for a couple of days and then it's released. So that would be a discharge, later on. So you would have to be there to collect the sample. Someone would have to collect those samples, right? Run-on can be sampled and monitored if it's believed that it is contributing to a NAL exceedance or a NEL, which I'll explain later. But if we have time, but it doesn't change anything. It doesn't, you can't say, oh, I had a NAL exceedance because all this turbid water from my neighbor washed onto my property. That's not how this permit works. That's your water, actually. You can manage the water and intercept it and divert it around your exposed soil areas and not let it commingle with your water on site. But once it commingles, there's your water. There's no averaging and there's no subtraction, if that makes sense. So you can see there's a lot of questions. Exceedance response requirements. So if you have a NAL exceedance, what do you do? Well, right here it says exceedance requirements. This is like a new thing in the permit, like a topic, right? So determine the source of the pollutant and implement corrective actions. Pretty straightforward, right? Continue with corrective actions to your compliance with NALs. But then it says this source evaluation shall be kept in the SWEP. And it lists corrective actions taken or will be taken and schedule information. It sounds a lot like a NAL exceedance report that we used to fill out and put in the SWEP binder, but now they're calling it a source evaluation. Well, the NAL exceedance report still exists, but it is only required to be prepared if requested by a regional water quality control board. So you would be submitting this to regional board. And now there's a new timeline, a new due date of 30 days. Okay, that didn't exist. So all the sampling data, again, is submitted via an ad hoc report on the SMARTS website. There's some new timelines. Compliant samples of fluent sampling, discharges during storm events, are submitted within 30 days of the conclusion of the storm event. Now exceedances, just like the last, so that's new. Now exceedances, just like the last permit, need to be submitted within 10 days of inclusion storm event. So you have an now exceedance, you are going to implement BMPs and try to resolve it, but you're going to need to fill out an ad hoc report and notify the LRP that there's been a now exceedance, and they need to review, certify, and submit the ad hoc report that you prepared for them within 10 days of conclusion of the storm event. So make it very clear what the timing is on that. So here's what goes in the Alex Senior report. I would just say the main thing is, like, the analytical results, date, time, all that. What BMPs you had installed when you had the Alex Senior, and what are the proposed corrective actions. And then there's this new thing about including photographs as well. So record retention is typically always 3 years. Receiving water monitoring, this only apply. I'm just going to just fly through these. The receiving water monitoring only applies to threes with a direct discharge. The triggers are 6 and 9 and 500. So it's not about your average anymore, right? You're just taking a scoop over the water, leaving your project, going into this receiving water. If it's out of 6 and 9 or above 500, you have triggered the receiving water monitoring triggers. You're going to have to collect samples upstream and downstream of the discharge point where you had the exceedance and analyze them for whichever parameter you exceeded. Was it pH? Was it turbidity? Was it both? Okay. And so this has changed a lot. And the dischargers will need to collect samples every 24 hours at those locations, upstream and downstream, if there's an extended QPE. Okay. And then submit the results within 10 days after the conclusion of the storm. This is like for information. There's like no numeric standards. It's essentially comparison sampling. They're comparing the upstream, with the downstream. Non-visible pollutant sampling, if there is the potential for non-visible pollutants to discharge due to a failure of BMPs, a spill, a leak, or a BMP breach, failure, malfunction, then this comes into play. The timing and reporting has changed. Discharge, we're no longer collecting comparison samples. There's no mention of collecting an unaffected background sample. So it just says collect at least one sample within 8 hours from each discharge location, hydraulically ground down gradient of the observed triggering event or condition. And then it says 24 hours. So literally for effluent sampling, receiving water monitoring, and now non-visible pollutant sampling, we are collecting samples every 24 hours for extended QPEs, or in this case, I guess it just says discharge, but you get the point. So discharges are not required, and this is new. So this was an option for LUPs, but it didn't say it for traditional in the '09 permit. For LUPs, it used to say, and now it says it for both, that if you clean it up, fully remediate it prior to it raining, prior to discharge, then the non-visible pollutant sampling is not triggered. So crucial to clean up non-visible pollutant spills. When do you submit them? Within 30 days of getting all non-visible pollutant sampling goes to a laboratory for analytical analysis. So it would be you need to submit this information via an ad hoc report, within 30 days of getting the results. This is a little complicated because now it's starting to talk about the TMDLs. I don't want to go too much into that, but if you do have a TMDL related now or NEL exceedance, that would be within 10 days. If you have a NEL exceedance, it will lead to these water quality based corrective actions. The NELs are typically applying to, whatever comes out of an active treatment system, right? And so we're familiar with the 10 and the 20 NTUs and the residual chemical NEL of less than 10% of the maximal allowable threshold concentration for the most sensitive species for that particular chemical. But now there's a new ATS NEL, and that is this pH NEL of 6 and 9. So important to remember that. And then there's that whole TMDL responsible discharger. And so let's get into this right here. So it's really not too complicated. I mean, I shouldn't say it's tough, but the explaining it has gotten easier. So really, you just need to determine whether or not the project is a responsible discharger. If they're in this watershed, there's a TMDL website that the state has. If they're in this location and they say it's impaired for nitrates or something like that, you perform a pollutant site assessment at your project and you have nitrates. Well, if you're in a TMDL listed watershed for nitrates and you have nitrates, then you are a responsible discharger. And what does that mean? That means that the TMDL and attachment H are applicable to your story. The next step would be determining what is required. and there are four compliance alternatives that are required. One of these four things is going to happen, okay? One, it might just say comply with the permit. For metals or sediment, it may say do Russell 2 calculations and use specific BMPs to meet or exceed the pre-construction condition. Sorry, yeah, in each phase of in construction, your BMPs would need to meet that pre-construction condition in each phase of construction. This down here, numeric action levels and NELs, these are new, TMDL related NAL and TMDL related NELs. So this is literally like an impaired water body that has been assigned a numeric standard. I'll make this up, like 0.04 milligrams per liter of nitrate is the NAL for that water body, that Bologna Creek right there, okay? And so if non-visible pollutant sampling is triggered, then this non-visible pollutant sampling, that you send off to the lab would be compared to the NALs, or in some cases a NEL, which is also just a number like 0.024 milligrams per liter of diazinon, something like that, then you're going to be looking at those numeric standards. So, like I said, you determine if you're a responsible discharger, determine which compliance alternative applies to your project, and then you move forward from there. If you have exceedances two or more times in the same reporting year from the same drainage area for a NAL exceedance or a NEL exceedance, that is what would make them reportable. You took samples and you exceeded the TMDL related NAL or the TMDL related NAL two times in a reporting year from the same drainage area, then these would be reportable. NEL exceedances are called a NEL violation. These are a violation, and it will lead to this water quality based corrective action. So it's 10:50. So I think I'll just push in a couple extra minutes here, just like 2 or 3 more minutes. So just talk about some BMPs. I'm going to fly through. You must have a stockpile of erosion controls. It's a permit requirement on site, not spray on products, but other projects. I would get a stockpile of BMPs, fibril, rock bags, visqueen, erosion control blankets, a new permit requirement. For inactive areas, I think we all understand what inactive is, that whole 14-day thing, but a completed area is also inactive. And so there is new, more strict verbiage here that is saying that these areas need to be immediately stabilized. So, if you complete your project and there's this area that's getting hydroseeded and you're going to grow grass, it needs to be hydroseeded quickly and not 2 months from now. Okay. I mean, not even close. I mean, you could see what it says. Immediately initiate stabilization. They put that in there for a reason. They're really tightening down on that. Okay. So diverting runoff away from your exposed soil. And, if you are going to manage runoff through, it needs to be through a pipe or engineered conveyance, a plastic pipe. So, just keep that in mind. You can't just dig a ditch anymore and manage runoff. You got to use a pipe. And curing time is now required. So anything that's got like a curing time, tackifiers, hydromulches, whatever the case may be, they need to be applied, and the curing time needs to be. This is a permit requirement, so you can't apply these things 2 hours before a rain event. That wouldn't be compliant. You have to follow these requirements, so people need to prepare for rain. Perimeter controls, stabilized construction entrances, basins, where per Casco's guidelines, the water's got to be sucked off the top using a skimmer. Um, they want people to track walk the slopes now in active areas of construction at the risk level and LUP type 2 and 3 projects. So this is a big thing. The linear sediment controls, the intervals have been updated. Remember, it used to say 10, 15, or 20. So now they've included these categories for less steep slopes. And stabilized construction entrances, vacuuming and sweeping prior to rain events. Of course, prevent non-stormwater discharges. Don't let vehicle wash waters or street cleaning enter a storm drain inlet. That would be unauthorized non-stormwater discharge. Here's the authorized non-stormwater discharges if you're just wondering. Remember, they're authorized, but they need to be compliant. There's rules to these, right? You got to remove the pollutant that's in them. You got to, collect them and analyze them for pH and turbidity. And if, maybe something has to go to a lab to get sampled, so BMP implementation, pollutant removal, sampling has to be dechlorinated. So like a lot of the water sources have chlorine in them. So it gets complicated. So don't just think just because it's on this list, yep, we can release that. Nope, you have to look at the permit. There's a variety of requirements in order to make them compliant. Okay, well, I think I'm gonna stop right there, just because I could just keep going. And if anybody has any questions, I can see there's quite a bit of
All
questions.
right. Well, thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
Man, you got to be out of breath. I tell you, you just presented an hour, which takes me 5 hours to present. Um, I think I've grabbed a lot of the questions. One
Okay.
at the end I didn't get a chance to respond to as Mel G asked a question about what do you mean by reportable if you exceed a null two or more times. I believe that was in the context of TMDLs. Could you speak to that?
Yeah. Yeah, back here on this slide right here. So this is the real story. Is so if you trigger that non-visible pollutant sampling, if you know, if it even applies to your project, you're a responsible discharger, right? This whole TMDL applicability thing applies to you. And if you triggered non-visible pollutant sampling, like from a breach or a spill or malfunction, you would have to collect non-visible pollutant samples. Well, and if your sample exceeded the now, it's not reportable. The permit says that if you exceed it two times from the same drainage area, same discharge location, within one reporting year, then you would have an exceedance. Okay.
All right, great. Let's see. You know what? Let's see. We got a few minutes still. If you have a question for Chris, go ahead and unmute and you can ask that question directly. And Chris, we got a lot of requests for your slides, so be sure to send me a PDF of them and I
Sure.
will post them to the link that I had put in the chat several
Sure.
times.
No
So,
problem.
did anyone have a question you'd like to present to Chris?
Yeah, this is Larry. Can the QSP, you got your delegate out there doing the inspection, and for the QPE inspection, can that be done remotely and with a video kind of chat thing?
That that's a great question because that kind of thing is not supported by permit language. I get questions like this all the time. And so, if it's not supported by permit language saying that you can or can't do that, then, there's really nowhere to go with that.
Yeah, we've been kicking around in the industry, and it's been coming up in a couple different places,
Yeah.
like in the training, like the site-specific training, like the
Hmm.
QSD inspections. Can the QSP just walk around the QSD on Zoom or FaceTime?
Yeah.
We actually have a couple workshops. One is on doing inspections with drones this week. I'm not sure what time that is, but look that up. And also on Friday, we have another one on technology in the stormwater program. Um,
And
I
I
would
know
say the
it was
language
kind of
doesn't go ahead.
oh, it was kind of permitted during COVID, and I'd asked that question at one of the water board meetings, and they kind of affirmed that it was okay.
Mm.
So I
Yeah,
mean, maybe at 3 o'clock today we can ask that guy to.
the the permit doesn't exclude it, but it does say what needs to go into that inspection. So you need to make sure you can actually do that inspection with the technology and
Mhm.
accomplish the objectives they want you to accomplish.
True.
Thanks.
No problem.
Anybody else? Question for Chris? All right. Well, Chris, if people have questions and they want to talk to you one on
Oh,
one, what's your contact information?
I apologize.
Right
So here's my
there.
contact information one more time if you need it. You can call me anytime. Anyone here can call me. I love phone calls. I would prefer you don't ask me questions via email. I won't respond to those. So for liability reasons. Chris
Uh,
said, you know, Chris said, no, that's not going to happen. So if you do email me, I'll just end up calling you. But
yeah.
well,
All right. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for presenting. This was wonderful.
no, it's my
You
pleasure.
you covered a lot. This is recorded, so people can go back and review it. And thank each of you for being a part of this Stormwater Awareness Week. We got lots of workshops still coming your way, even today. So at 3 p.m., as I was putting in the chat, if CGP is your business, you're not going to want to miss, at least CGP in California, I should say. You're not going to want to miss the 3 p.m. chat with Brandon Rosenboom, who is the permit writer and the lead person for the CGP in California, and Matt Simisu, who is the head person in charge of smarts. And they're going to talk about the changes with smarts due to the new CGP. And there's going to be a good Q&A time. So you're going to want to be there for sure. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks,
And
everybody.
we'll see you at the next workshop.
Take care, everybody.